Hey, it's Skin Teen, and I'm here to talk about Lucius 3. Lucius 3 comes from Shiver Games and continues the adventures of Lucius 1 and 2. The games follow the central plotline of title character Lucius, a boy with some otherwise supernatural powers of an evil inclination. Lucius is the son of Satan, and it would appear as though he can't help but carry out the duties of the Dark Lord by exacting punishment upon those who seem to otherwise deserve it. For what it's worth, I really enjoyed my experience with Lucius 1. The game is clearly built as a homage to John Moore's 1976 classic The Omen, starring Gregory Peck, so keeping that in mind really makes the game a campy and fun horror experience. Lucius 2 did not grab me in the same way whatsoever. Sporting a revamped mechanical system that asked players to level up abilities, among other nuances, I found the awkward complexities Lucius 2 brought to the table really frustrating, and outside of gameplay mechanics, the story was just bizarre. I streamed my experience with Lucius 3 on my Twitch channel, and I think the question most often asked throughout the night was, "Oh wow, they made a third game?" Oh yes, they did. Lucius 3 follows our title character again, although this time he has a friend, Detective MacGuffin from the first game. The game's location is set in the neighborhood of the original as well, although Lucius 1 took place within the home of Lucius. Lucius 3 takes place across the entire neighborhood of Winter Hill, which is where Lucius's home previously was. The gameplay seems to have returned to the style of the first title, with a journal and a clear-cut set of tasks that one must complete to progress through each stage. The main difference this time is that Lucius 3 appears to have an open world. The interesting thing about that open world of Lucius 3 is that there really isn't anything at all that interesting within it to warrant its existence. Games tend to want to give players the freedom to explore these days, and we've seen it time and time again in titles where it was bizarre to try and include it. One that immediately comes to mind is The Evil Within 2. And while I enjoyed some of the aspects of having an open world to explore in The Evil Within 2, I felt that it was wasted and unnecessary for the sake of the larger, more centralized story that was taking place. Open worlds should exist in games that have enough content to justify needing them. In larger scope titles like The Witcher 3 or Red Dead Redemption 2, an open world is utilized with a bevy of secondary missions and open-ended tasks like hunting. The rebooted Tomb Raider franchise even attempts to use open world concepts to give players the freedom to explore tombs and hunt treasures outside of the focal narrative. These are games that need the scope of an open world. For something like Lucius 3, it could have worked had there been random people that we were asked to kill in the world, like a Hitman reboot, but as a devil child. Instead, Lucius 3 wastes this open world with awkward silence, blown-out audio, and a simplistic, laughably mediocre story. It gets worse, too. I am able to forgive Lucius 3 for its shortcomings in storytelling. The central plot of Lucius 3 involves our character working with Detective MacGuffin to unlock the 7 seals. This, of course, presents itself as a scroll in the game, complete with 7 seals. And if you're not up on your theology, these 7 seals are a part of the Book of Revelation to bring forth an apocalypse. In order to unlock these 7 seals in the game, we are tasked with identifying the 4 horsemen of said apocalypse that apparently live in this one town and, well, killing them. Aided by an omnipresent character named Gabriel and our old pal from Lucius 1, MacGuffin, the tasks themselves weren't all too difficult, most of which were completed somewhat easier by exploring the unnecessarily large world beforehand. The clear money shot of each task was the death scene, which was often met with awkward camera angles, intense slow motion, and unnecessary dubstep. A few of these were insultingly sensational, only going for shock value in both content and method over a more classic definition of horror, and I personally felt like this was missing the mark entirely on what horror even means. There is horror, and there's just plain horrible. Some things are just awful and shouldn't be used as a sensational exclamation point on an otherwise lackluster sentence. When these types of awful are used in a video game, in the way that Lucius 3 executes them, it's just poor taste. But I digress. Once you reach the end of the game, there was another unnecessary mechanic added in out of the blue: platforming. While you had to do some platforming in the beginning of the game as a forced tutorial, most of the time I found myself not needing to do any of it. In fact, most of the game for me was trying to find the devil bobbleheads scattered around the town, and I'm not sure what those even did or if it was merely just collectibles. After a brief stint of trying to platform to where the end of the game took place, you were interestingly given a moral choice between good and evil. And of course you had to choose the evil, because what was the point if you didn't? I did not enjoy my time with Lucius 3, to say the least. I'm a tolerant person when it comes to horror games, and often I give a chance to many types of walking simulators and indies built with their own spin on what is otherwise Amnesia: The Dark Descent with a different setting. This, however, completely missed the mark for me. I believe what fans of Lucius want is something more closely related to the experience of the first game, which is to say that most of us just want to be a little boy who happens to be evil, killing off the people that our true father asks us to. I understand building out a narrative beyond just the first game, trying to iterate on a storyline to give it a deeper meaning and experience. We're talking about horror here, though. This is a genre that should either be met with true creeping unease or schlocky extreme. In the case of Lucius and its franchise, a clear tribute to Damien the Omen, none of this should be that difficult. I know that this is said to be the third and final game of the series, but were I to make a suggestive critique on any sequels that could potentially crop up, I would suggest that perhaps Lucius becomes similar to a Hitman game in its execution. If you had to give it a setting, why not something a little more classic and tropey, like a boys' home or a boarding school? Put Lucius in a somewhat believable scenario, and perhaps the game might make a little more sense. As it stands currently, though, Lucius 3 felt like a cheap execution scotch-taped together by poor ideas and sensationalism. Lucius 3 is currently available on PC via the Steam platform. I personally would not recommend Lucius 3 for any type of playthrough. Although I guess if you like games that are really hard to get through, this might be up your alley. For me, it just didn't work.